Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. So, today Blizzard is always trying to expand their lore, sow the seeds for future expansions and ideas, but that was not always the case. For a long time they chewed through their RTS characters and really didn't have a big picture in mind. So, today we are going to go through 3 instances where Blizzard rewrote or reimagined an essential part of the Warcraft universe to better fit the future of the game. If you like content like this, I do have a playlist full of stuff which is covering the development of World of Warcraft. But let's start it off with the Draenei. I think this is one that will come as a bit of a surprise to people who started after the Burning Crusade. So, the Draenei went under massive lore changes in the journey from Warcraft 3 to the Burning Crusade. In War 3, while we're playing as Illidan, we meet the Draenei, led by a Kama, and we manage to strike up an alliance with them. Now, at this stage of the lore, what we know of as the Broken today were the actual Draenei. They had been slaughtered by the orcs, and none of the spacefaring lore pretty much existed. Now, at this time, the lore was really also quite different with the Eredar. The Eredar were a demonic race that actually drove Sargeras mad, rather than what we see today where Sargeras seduced the Eredar with offerings of power. So, the whole idea of Velen and his exiles, it just didn't exist in the original incarnation of the universe. Now, if you think of the planet's name being called Draenor, it also made a lot of sense with the old lore. Draenor was the homeworld of the Draenei, and in fairness, they did share it with the orcs, but that made a fair amount of sense, and it's just what the Draenei called it. In modern lore, what happened is that Velen and his fleeing Eredar renamed themselves Draenei, which means exiled ones in Eredun, and after spending thousands of years hopping from planet to planet, they crashed on Draenor irreparably, and I assume they figured, well, we're pretty much stuck here then, and therefore they decided to name it Draenor, which means Exile's Rest in Eredun. So what did the orcs call Draenor? Well, they didn't really call it anything. In the 2006 novel Rise of the Horde, which was used to establish much of this lore, much like how the Illidan novel established some of the Legion stuff, Durotan remarks that the Draenei called the place Draenor, while the orcs just call it the world. So there has been some confusion as well about how long the Draenei were actually on Draenor for. Old descriptions of places like Auchindoun would make you think they've been there for thousands of years, which makes sense. With the old lore where Akama and his Broken were the Draenei. The most modern lore, though, puts their touchdown at about 200 years ago, which, when you think about it, is quite strange. There are massive and apparently very old burial sites like Auchindoun. Now, they make little sense for a long-lived species that's only been there for 200 years. Plus, the amount of time needed to build out a full, civilization with places like Shattrath, maybe it's a bit implausible, or maybe they are just very fast, technologically advanced builders. Okay then, but what about Akama and his Broken? Well, the new lore is that essentially a whole bunch of the Draenei did not escape the orcs in time, and of course most of them were killed, but some of them got twisted by the fell magic that had been washing over their heartland whenever it had been conquered by the orcs. That's pretty much what happened there. Basically, when developing the Burning Crusade, Blizzard had to make a number of decisions about the direction of the lore that were very controversial at the time, and this was certainly one of those instances. People thought they knew the Draenei from the strategy games, and the Draenei town of the Swamp of Sorrows, and it turned out, well, that just was not the plan that Blizzard ended up having. Overall, I think this one was a good move, though. It allowed for some pretty interesting overall lore, so yeah, I'm happy enough with it. Next, we have the Azerothian Titan constructs. Basically, everything you knew about the Keepers of Azeroth and a lot of the stuff that happened in Wrath is a lie. You got cheated, literally, by Loken. He tricked the whole lot of us. So him tricking us is basically just a good excuse for Blizzard to introduce new lore and sort of, wipe over the old stuff which no longer fits their vision. So back in Wrath of the Lich King, the lore was that Loken was the prime designate of the Titans, i.e. the leader of the Watchers on Azeroth, and he was the guy in charge of the operation to keep Yogg-Saron jailed. Now, at the time, the Titan lore was a bit different. They were split into the Aesir and the Vanir. As an example, Aman'Thul was said to be an Aesir, Khaz'goroth was said to be a Vanir. During the war against the Black Empire and the Ordering of Azeroth, the Aesir and Vanir Watchers were created. These were 2 groups of Titan Watchers which were basically there to generally defend the world, and they were led by the Keepers, Loken, Hudir, Freya, Thorim, and co. Now, the Aesir and the Vanir roughly in common translate to earth and storm giants. So, the story was that after the Titans left, Loken fell under the sway of Yogg-Saron. He corrupted Freya and Hodir and then killed Sif, but framed it on the leader of the Ice Giants, which caused a war between them and Thorin. He then sparked off the war between the Aesir and the Vanir constructs before ending it by putting the whole lot of them, including the Earthen and the Vrykul, in stasis. Now, at this time, Mists of Pandaria didn't exist, but from what we understand, the Mogu weren't in stasis because of all the mop lore, so that's just a bit of an inconsistency. Now, his death in the Halls of Lightning fired off a signal to Algalon, which, of course, we dealt with at the end of the raid in Ulduar. Now, that's what we thought happened. What actually happened is quite different. All of the information, almost all the information in the Tribunal of Ages in the Hall of Stone was mostly a lie. The actual story is that Loken had an affair with Sif, and in a fit of old god-caused befuddlement, he killed her. He then framed that death on the leader of the Ice Giants, and, as happened in the original story, caused the war with Thorin. Now, he stopped this war by creating an army using the Forge of Wills, but Yogg-Saron had infected the Forge with the Curse of Flesh, which meant that the new constructs basically were the disease vector for the Curse of Flesh. Now, Loken at this stage really knew that he'd messed up big and he wanted to cover his tracks. He knew that Algalon finding out would pretty much be his end, so he began working on the downfall of the Keepers. He convinced Helya to imprison Odin within the Halls of Valor. That's why, we just didn't see him. Now, Loken wasn't actually the Prime Designate in real lore. Odin actually was, but he pretty much assumed the role after Odin was locked up. He killed Memoron, and then he corrupted Freya and Hodir. This leaves only Tyr, Arcades, whatever, and Ra. Now, Ra was out of action, locked within the Mogushan vaults after his discovery of the Pantheon's death. Tyr and I'm going to call them Arcades from now on. The two of them realized they were pretty much the only two guys left, so they stole the discs of Norgannon and they fled so that they could research them. Now, the discs basically record history automatically, so they could use the discs to find out basically what Loken had done. But Loken did not want that. He sent a Sithaxi at them, leading to Tyr sacrificing himself in a successful attempt to save his compatriot. Then the Tribunal of Ages was created by Loken, and then he filled it with false information to confuse us. He gave himself the title of Prime Designate and changed the Algalon codes to fire off when he died rather than Odin. So, as you can see, a pretty massive change to how the lore operated. Then we move on to the Burning Crusade. I mean, this technically isn't a retcon, as they didn't change what happened. It's more a massive reframing of events, such that the context of the past has changed. A bit like with the Loken stuff, where, things are just sort of canonically explained away. Now, the Burning Crusade is a very strange expansion in the game's lore. It's still very much in the era of Blizzard, just dropping characters in from the RTS for us to kill. From our perspective, Illidan had just gone mad with power during the Burning Crusade. He turned from the RTS character, the character we knew from the RTS games, into someone who was actually just full-on legit crazy. The TBC manual tells us that Illidan was essentially scared that Kil'jaeden would come for him, given how Illidan failed to kill Arthas at the end of the Frozen Throne expansion. He is said to have basically locked Outland's portals down, closed them off until he was ready, and he was spending the interim period gathering forces. He was corrupting a new horde of orcs using the blood of Magtheridon. Illidan generally seems to have been unhinged, driven mad by what happened with Arthas. He even yells at players, denying that Arthas even defeated him, which is just false. It's all quite strange and unmotivated, really. Basically, TBC lore originally was just a complete mess. Now, a mixture of Chronicle, the Illidan novel and things, and the Legion expansion have reinterpreted things, sort of explained things, and given us a lot more context. So, the newer lore modifies Illidan's motivation significantly to be more heroic, even if his means were questionable. He ends up going to great lengths to attack the Legion, even destroying the homeworld of the Nathrezim. Moving on to the attack on Shattrath, well, wasn't actually done by Illidan, that was done by Kael'thas. And Illidan did not know about it or order it. Indeed, when Maiev tried to get the Shattar to help her capture Illidan in the novel, they declined because they basically said, he's not really the main threat. Illidan said that he would give Black Temple back to Akama's people to be, a place of the light. Now, of course, in the novel, he does do a lot of questionable ends justify the means thing, but there's definitely a lot more going on than what Blizzard actually did with the Burning Crusade. We then see in the Demon Hunter starting zone, he is attempting to get the Sargarite Keystone. This is so that he can attack Argus with the goal of taking out Archimonde and kill Jaden. Now, judging by how his forces supposedly wiped the floor with the Legion on Nathreza, it seems like he would have had a fighting chance. So the real enemy of the Burning Crusade is actually Kael'thas and eventually Kil'jaeden. Illidan was a bit of a weird side thing. We probably should have found a way of being friends with him. Now, of course, this all happened at a time when Blizzard was not concerned with future lore. They already knew they had Arthas and Deathwing to get through, and, you know, they were really banking on Project Titan doing super well and being another World of Warcraft, so maybe they just weren't thinking that long term. Alright, so as you can see, these are all massive changes, and in every case, they're changes that opened up the future of the game and allowed for more story. Take Sargeras and the Eridar. The old story, well, it was kind of tried, you know, it didn't really have much room for character development or things like that. Whereas the new way opened up for a lot of really high-quality lore, allowing us to delve far deeper into the Titans, Sargeras, and then the Eridar, and get the Draenei and all of that new lore, sort of out of that. If they didn't make that call, imagine what the Burning Crusade Warlords and Legion, especially 7.3, would have been. They would have been totally different. Rewriting the old Titan lore in Northrend is another move like this. It's one that allowed them to fit in way more characters and more story. And as for the Burning Crusade, well, damn, I mean, they really messed that one up first time round, so I'm glad they went back to polish up the lore. There you go, guys, a bit of a look into Blizzard's storytelling process. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.